Google Pixel XL Review. Google's Nexus devices were meant to be showcases of Android in its purest form, benchmarks to live up to in a world full of manufacturer-specific customizations with clashing styles and unnecessary differences. The idea was to partner with different manufacturers each year so that none of them would feel as though Google was trying to compete with them. All of that has changed now. Google is actively trying to compete with its own partners, and what's more, it has developed a bunch of customizations of its own which aren't getting shared around. While nearly all Nexus phones over the years were workhorses, not too expensive and not too premium, but certainly solid and respectable, the new Google Pixel and Pixel XL, on the other hand, are aiming right for the top of the market. It isn't a stretch to say that Google is targeting Apple. The segmentation, pricing and even design of its two models are pretty much direct equivalents of Apple's lineup. The company might have lost legions of Nexus fans, but will it win over iPhone loyalists? We're eager to see how this works out. Visually, nothing about the Pixel stands out all that much. It's a bit of a mashup of designs we've seen from Apple, Samsung, and HTC. Google is proud of the fact that it designed everything in-house and only used HTC as a manufacturer, but we don't see any strong design language or identity as a result. The front is glass, with a lot of space above and below the screen. The spec sheet lists 2.5D Corning Gorilla Glass 4, but curvature at the edges is extremely slight. The sensor window on our very silver test unit looked like an ugly black spot right in the center of its forehead. It's better concealed on the quite black version. Android navigation is all on screen, so the chin is blank. The back and sides are single metal frame except for a large patch of glass on the upper third of the rear. This allows for antennas to work without being blocked, but there are still thick antenna lines on the top and sides of the frame. The patch does give Google's new phones a distinctive look, but the proportion seems odd, especially because of the placement of the fingerprint sensor on the rear. The camera is flush with the back, but that's partly down to the fact that the entire phone is thicker at the top, giving it a wedge shape. The difference between 8.5mm at the top and 7.3mm at the bottom is so slight that it honestly would not be noticeable in ordinary use, but Google has actually emphasized it with the way the phone's sides curve towards the back. The Pixel XL is also a little top-heavy, but we got used to this fairly easily. The power and volume buttons are on the right, and we found the placement a bit awkward. There's a tray on the left that can fit a single nano SIM, microSD cards are not supported. A 3.5mm audio jack sits on the top, and a USB Type-C port is on the bottom between two grills, only one of which is actually a speaker. Overall, this phone is a bit too bulky, and we weren't really wowed by it the same way we were by Samsung's current Galaxy S6 and S7 design, for example. After using the Pixel XL, we think we'd be more comfortable with the smaller Pixel, and we're happy that we don't lose any major features if we make that choice. Google hasn't held back in terms of hardware, though. The Pixel siblings have essentially identical specs apart from screen size, resolution, and battery capacity. There's a top-of-the-line Qualcomm Snapdragon 821 SoC with two 2.15 GHz cores and two 1.6 GHz cores for efficiency, along with integrated Adreno 530 graphics. Both models have 4 GB of RAM and either 32 or 128 GB of fixed storage. Our 32 GB unit had 29.7 GB of usable space. Considering the lack of microSD expansion, we think 128 GB might be the better bet for some in the long term. The Pixel XL has a 5.5-inch 1440 by 2560 pixel screen, whereas the Pixel steps down to a 5-inch panel at 1080 by 1920. Both promise 100% NTSC color gamut reproduction and true blacks, and while we can't speak for the smaller one, the Pixel XL's screen might be one of the best we've ever seen on a smartphone. It's bright and crisp, with natural-looking colors. Connectivity standards are all up to date. There's Cat12 LTE, which means downloads of up to 600 Mbps and uploads of up to 75 Mbps, if the service provider can deliver that capability. There's also Wi-Fi 802.11 acres, Bluetooth 4.2, GPS, and NFC. USB 3.0 speed is supported over the Type-C connection. There's also a variety of spatial and environmental sensors, plus what Google calls the Android Sensor Hub, a smaller dedicated processor which is constantly monitoring for input, including voice commands, even when the Snapdragon 821 is in standby. At launch, Google made a huge point of establishing its phone's camera capabilities, and the fact that both Pixel models have exactly the same hardware. The rear camera has a single 12.3 megapixel sensor with 1.55 micrometers pixels plus phase detection as well as laser autofocus. There's also an 8 megapixel camera in front. The extra space in the larger model allows for a huge 3450 mAh battery. Quick charging is supported, and Google supplies a hefty 18 watts charger. Also in the box, you'll find Type A as well as Type-C USB cables, a small USB OTG adapter, and a pair of earphones with rubber tips in 3 sizes. That OTG adapter in particular is interesting, since it can be used to plug your old phone into the Pixel to import contacts, photos, calendar data and messages including iMessages from an iPhone. Google is replacing its much-loved Nexus line with the Pixel phones, which means that they are now the company's best representation of its vision for Android. However, what you get here isn't pure Android but a pixelized version of it with a custom launcher and numerous tweaks. It's still unclear whether other manufacturers will be allowed to adopt one or more of these features. Whatever the reasoning, the end product is extremely slick. This is our first taste of Android 7.1, so quite a lot of things are new. It starts with the home screen. You'll notice a tab with the Google logo in the upper left, which reveals a Google search bar with your recent searches listed beneath it. Swiping inwards on the tab, or anywhere else on the home screen for that matter, pulls in Google Now, with its familiar cards showing the weather, news updates, and other bits of information. A long press on the home button pulls up a voice search prompt, your first brush with Google Assistant. There's a dock with 5 icons on the bottom of the home screen, and you now swipe upwards within this area to show the full app drawer, which allows for one extra shortcut. The icons for all system apps and preloaded Google apps are now round. You can long press on app icons to pull up 3D touch-like contextual action prompts, but there's no way to know which apps support this and which don't. Half the time you'll see the usual long press behavior which lets you drag icons to the home screen or delete their apps.